synthesis is actually the result of action of ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone coming from the anterior pituitary. If ACTH is deficient or ACTH is absent, this whole cycle cannot take place. Alright, so it is only that in the presence of ACTH, all these enzymes will act to convert cholesterol into various sets of hormones. Right? So let's see how pregnenolone is converted into aldosterone. Till now, we have seen that corticosterone is synthesized here, right? Here in the vertical downward direction, cortisol, estradiol, testosterone, androstenedione, DHEA, right? Now, this corticosterone will be converted how it is utilized to synthesize aldosterone. So now we have seen that pregnenolone is formed, progesterone, 11-deoxycorticosterone, corticosterone by the action of various enzymes we saw in the previous slide. Now corticosterone is now converted into aldosterone because of aldosterone synthase. And aldosterone synthase will act only in presence of angiotensin 2 and potassium. Alright? And of course, ACTH is required for all the procedures. So right, this is the way various sets of hormones which we have. So it's so many hormones. If you see, there are so many precursors, so many final products which are important for us, because any deficiency of enzyme, if any enzyme is deficient, for example, if you see here, 21 beta hydroxylase is deficient. So progesterone will not be converted into 11-deoxycorticosterone or corticosterone, right? Progesterone will also not be converted into 17-hydroxyprogesterone and thereafter androstenedione. So this whole cycle will be disturbed if 21 beta hydroxylase is deficient. So what will happen? Because of this deficiency, this product will be produced in excess, because there is always a negative feedback mechanism. So if these final products are not appearing in the blood, the precursor will start increasing. So precursor will start increasing, it will lead to a syndrome which will be because of excess of these precursor hormones. Which precursor hormones? Progesterone and pregnenolone. Alright, so this is how we can decipher and try to understand the deficiency or excess diseases which are related to the adrenal gland. So this is about adrenocortical hormones, how they are synthesized. So in this particular chart, you can see that adrenal steroid hormones in adults, what is their concentration in the plasma, how much average amount they are secreted, what is their activity in terms of whether they are glucocorticoid or mineralocorticoid. Now let's talk about what do you mean, what is the meaning of the term glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid. So glucocorticoid means like it acts on the metabolism of glucose. That is why they are called as having glucocorticoid-like activity. On the other hand, there is the mineralocorticoid activity, meaning they are mainly acting on the minerals. Which minerals? Mainly sodium, potassium, calcium, etc. So that's how they are, according to their functional aspects, they are named like that. Okay, so if you see here, these are the various hormones released by the adrenal gland, adrenal cortex. So there is cortisol, corticosterone, aldosterone, deoxycorticosterone, dehydroepiandrosterone, and these are the synthetic steroids. Synthetic means the kind of steroids which we have, the scientists have named, which are used in the treatment aspects. Okay, so there is cortisone, prednisolone, methylprednisone, dexamethasone, and 9-alpha fluorocortisone. So here they are comparing the activity, the glucocorticoid and the mineralocorticoid activity. So if you see here, cortisol is secreted in the range of 12 microgram per 100 ml, and the cortisol activity around, if you take it as 1, so cortisol has the maximum glucocorticoid activity. It also has a very good mineralocorticoid activity. So cortisol can function both as a mineralocorticoid and as a glucocorticoid, right? If you see aldosterone here, aldosterone has majority, principally it's a mineralocorticoid, very less glucocorticoid activity. Okay, so thereby this is the comparison given here, which hormone is acting which way. If you see amongst the synthetic steroids, the principal hormone which is having a very good glucocorticoid activity is your dexamethasone. Okay, dexamethasone, and remember one thing, that all these steroidal hormones play a very important role when you are dealing with some emergency clinical situations. I'll tell you what are the clinical situations where the steroids play a very important role clinically. Right? So principal dexamethasone is very important medicine which is used in the emergency setup. So majority of dexa is having glucocorticoid activity, that is 30 times. Okay, and if you see 9-alpha-fluorocortisol is having maximum mineralocorticoid, almost 125 times. All right. So you need to understand when you need to understand any the pathogenesis of a disease, and then you want to treat it. Okay. Let's move on further. Let's talk about the transport of these adrenocortical hormones. So 90 to 95% of the cortisol in the plasma binds to two types of plasma proteins. One is cortisol binding globulin and the other is transportin. And they have a long half-life. Okay? And 60% of the circulating aldosterone combines with the plasma proteins. So they have a short life, only 20 minutes. So if you remember in the first lecture of endocrine physiology, I have talked about what is the importance of protein or plasma protein binding of hormones. So binding lessens the rapid fluctuations and ensures relatively uniform distribution, does not allow the hormone to get depleted in the kidney, in the liver very fast, so remains in the system for some point of time to ensure the functions. How it is degraded? Mainly in the liver. It's conjugated to glucuronic acid and to sulfate. Then it's excreted mainly in the feces and some in the urine. So whenever we want to check for any kind of disease and arrive at a diagnosis, we need to measure the urinary levels of metabolites. Okay, or the precursors also. For example, if you take the example of a disease called as pheochromocytoma, I'm taking the example of an adrenal medullary disease. Pheochromocytoma is a benign tumor which is sitting in the adrenal medulla, which is secreting catecholamine. Catecholamine is an epinephrine and norepinephrine. So if you want to diagnose this pheochromocytoma, which is actually classically presents with a syndrome of what do you say, fluctuations in the blood pressure. There is almost metastatic hypertension. Hypertension means the blood pressure levels reach beyond 200 systolic and beyond 120 diastolic. So the uh, hypertension, a very high level of hypertension, is the hallmark of pheochromocytoma. And how do you diagnose? You diagnose by checking the urinary 24 hours metanephrine levels. Metanephrine, these are the byproducts of catecholamine breakdown. That is your epinephrine and norepinephrine. So you measure 24-hour levels of metanephrine. If they are higher than the range, then you confirm that this is a case of pheochromocytoma. Let's talk about mineralocorticoids in detail now. And the principal mineralocorticoid I told you is aldosterone, that is synthesized by the adrenal gland, adrenal cortex. So let's talk about what is the role of renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system in synthesis of aldosterone. So renin is an enzyme or a hormone which converts angiotensinogen, which is a protein, plasma protein, into angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2 by ACE enzyme, angiotensin converting enzyme. Angiotensin 2 acts on the adrenal cortex to synthesize aldosterone, and this aldosterone then is responsible for all the functions of the mineralocorticoid functions we are going to talk about right now. So you know that angiotensin 2 is capable of negatively inhibiting the renin release. Then this angiotensin 2 will not be synthesized. And the principal function of angiotensin 2 is vasoconstriction. So you must be learning this in training. So let's come to the functions of aldosterone now. So main function of aldosterone, as I said, is mineral on the minerals. Which minerals? Sodium, potassium, and hydrogen. So if you see, what does it do to sodium and potassium? So main function of aldosterone is to retain the sodium and lose the potassium. So sodium increases the sodium reabsorption in the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting ducts. In contrast, aldosterone increases the renal loss of potassium. So if you see, sodium is getting reabsorbed, along with it comes the water. So water will also be reabsorbed along with sodium. So aldosterone retains sodium, loses potassium, retains more amount of water. This is first function. So that's why, because since it's retaining water, it's retaining sodium, so it is responsible for maintenance of blood volume and blood pressure thereafter. So that's why it is also termed as a life-saving. So imagine if there is aldosterone increases in the secretion increases from the adrenal gland for some reason, what will happen? So you know that sodium and water will also be retained and it will be absorbed. What will happen if this is retained? It will lead to, as I said, it is going to add to the blood volume or the extracellular fluid volume. So there will be increase in the ECF. This will raise the arterial blood pressure, release the atrial natriuretic peptide, and this will lead to what we call as pressure diuresis and pressure natriuresis. Diuresis means increased urination, and natriuresis meaning increasing urinary loss of sodium. So these two functions, what will they result in? Because of this pressure diuresis, pressure natriuresis, this will lead to the phenomena what we call as aldosterone escape. So if your system is functioning normal, if everything is going to be normal, then the body is capable of handling overload of aldosterone in the way of aldosterone escape. So it will escape the increased levels of aldosterone in the body. Understand? Now, on the other hand, if you see there is a decreased aldosterone level, what will it cause? It will result in loss of sodium and water. This will lead to decreased extracellular fluid volume, resulting in drop in arterial blood pressure and resulting in circulatory shock. So remember that aldosterone, from the last slide, if you remember, I said it's a life-saving hormone. So its level are important to be maintained in the normal range. So if the levels are less, it is going to lead to circulatory shock. Right? So these are the important role of aldosterone. So on the other hand, if you see the role in potassium, so normally aldosterone loses potassium, right? So if the levels are increased, it's going to lose more amount of potassium, leading to hypokalemia, and this will lead to muscle weakness. And if there is decreased levels of aldosterone, it is going to lead to potassium retaining, and this will lead to hyperkalemia. And you know that higher levels of potassium are cardiotoxic. So this is the action of aldosterone, and whenever it's high or low, what is its role? Talking about the hydrogen ions, so whenever the aldosterone is there, it is going to increase the tubular hydrogen ion secretion, leading to metabolic alkalosis. So similar effect is seen in the sweat gland, in the salivary gland, and the intestinal absorption as well, right? So now let's see how aldosterone acts on the renal cells. So this is the one of the cells, renal cells of the distal convoluted tubule. So this is the luminal side of it, and this is the basolateral membrane. On the basolateral membrane, you have the sodium potassium ATPase pump, and on the luminal membrane, you have another pump, which is the result of action of aldosterone. So if aldosterone is a steroid, so it's able to cross the cell membrane easily. It binds to the cytoplasmic receptor, which is called as the mineralocorticoid receptor. And this receptor hormone complex then moves into the nucleus and binds to the DNA component, which is meant for this complex binding, which is called the hormone response element on the DNA. This results in transcription and translation of newer proteins. Okay. So which are these newer proteins? These are also resulting in synthesis of newer mitochondrial enzymes. So these proteins, the most important protein that is synthesized and important for its function is the ENaC channel. ENaC channel is known as epithelial sodium channel. Okay. So this epithelial sodium channel is responsible for entry of sodium inside the cell, and from the cell then it is reabsorbed into the ECF and the blood via the sodium potassium pump on the basolateral membrane. Alright, so this is the epithelial sodium channel. So when you are wanting to correct excess of aldosterone, whenever you are trying to treat that, you can give a drug called as amiloride and spironolactone. Spironolactone is the antagonist of the mineralocorticoid receptor, which will block the receptor and aldosterone will not be able to act. And if you want to block the sodium channel or the ENaC channel, you can give the drug amiloride. So amiloride is blocker of ENaC channel and spironolactone is a blocker of mineralocorticoid. Both these drugs are utilized as diuretics when there is hypertension. This is an important source of treating that hypertension by inducing diuresis. Right? So this is the mechanism of action of aldosterone. This was the steroid kind of action of aldosterone or genomic action of aldosterone. There are certain actions, as I mentioned in the some previous slides also, that aldosterone can act through non-genomic actions, which acts through the G protein coupled receptor and second messenger system. So how did we come to know that the aldosterone has two ways of acting? We know that steroid takes time to act because it has to generate and synthesize newer genes, newer proteins. That is going to take time. Whereas certain actions of aldosterone are very quick to act and very quick to produce responses. So these responses were found to be later because of the G protein and the second messenger system. So what does it do? As I said earlier also, that it increases the cyclic AMP in the vascular smooth muscles and the epithelial cells of the renal collecting tubules, thereby converting it into adenylyl cyclase, converting cyclic ATP into cyclic AMP and cyclic AMP activating the protein kinase. So aldosterone has been also shown to rapidly stimulate the phosphatidyleinase of the second messenger system. In addition to cyclic AMP, that is one of the second messengers, the other second messenger that is activated is IP3-DHT. How this aldosterone secretion is regulated? It is regulated primarily by two factors. One is extrarenal, means some factors which are out of the renal system, and some factors are intrarenal. Which are the extrarenal factors? So whenever there is hyperkalemia, so this is one important stimulus which is going to stimulate the release of aldosterone. Very important and one of the strongest of stimulus for the release of aldosterone. Whenever there is hyponatremia, whenever ACTH is released, whenever there are circadian rhythm disturbances, and in response to release of atrial natriuretic peptide. These are the factors which stimulate the release of aldosterone. Intrarenal factors, most important factors we have earlier seen that anything affecting the renin-angiotensin system. Right? So this I've already shown you. Let's talk about what happens when there is excess of aldosterone. So the syndrome, I remember I mentioned whenever there is an aldosterone is an access due to some reason, but the body mechanisms are quite good to handle it. There is aldosterone escape. When some other pathology is there which is resulting in excess of aldosterone, the body cannot handle it and aldosterone escape is not sufficient. So this results in Conn syndrome. What is Conn syndrome? It is actually primary aldosteronism. The cause is generally a tumor which is sitting in the zona glomerulosa, or there is a hyperplastic adrenal cortex. So what happens in this? Why do we call it a syndrome? Remember, syndrome is whenever there are more than 2-3 symptoms together. Okay? So excess of aldosterone is going to retain sodium and water, resulting in hypertension. It is also going to result in potassium loss. This is going to result in hypokalemia. It is also going to result in increased hydrogen ion excretion, which is going to result in alkalosis. So these three symptoms, hypertension, hypokalemia, and alkalosis, are together termed as Conn syndrome, right? So this is what is because of excess of aldosterone. So how do you treat it? You have to treat the cause. Cause is tumor. So you have to remove the tumor surgically. Right. So now coming to secondary causes of excess of aldosterone. So there could be a genetic deficiency of 11 beta hydroxysteroid. This is the enzyme which I was talking to you about. So cortisol may have substantial mineralocorticoid effect. So this condition is called as apparent mineralocorticoid excess syndrome. Alright. So not exactly aldosterone is not natural, but there is a mineralocorticoid apparent syndrome because of this deficiency of the enzyme. What will happen if aldosterone is deficient? We have already talked about the sodium and water will be lost, so there will be hypertension, potassium will be retained, leading to hyperkalemia, and which is cardiotoxic, and hydrogen ion excretion will be reduced, resulting in metabolic acidosis. Let's talk about glucocorticoid, and the principal glucocorticoid which is synthesized by the adrenal cortex is your cortisol. Okay, so cortisol, why we call it as glucocorticoid? Because it principally has a role in carbohydrate metabolism. So what does it do? It improves glucose supply to the brain and heart in stressful conditions. So that's why whenever there is any kind of physical stress or a mental stress or emotional stress, any kind of stress, any kind of injury, any kind of mechanical injury, any kind of disease, any kind of inflammation, any kind of infection. So all these are stressors for the body. So this cortisol will play a very important role during this stress. So it plays an important role in starvation. It increases gluconeogenesis so that it provides glucose to tackle that kind of stress, provides energy for that purpose. It provides enzymes which are required to convert amino acids into glucose and increases glycogen lysis in the liver, glycogen synthesis in the muscle, and decreased peripheral utilization of glucose so that more and more glucose is available to provide energy. That is the reason whenever the cortisol is in excess or if you give synthetic cortisol for that is called synthetic steroids for a long period of time, it can lead to increased blood glucose levels leading to adrenal diabetes. Let's talk about role of the cortisol and protein metabolism. So what is the effect on protein metabolism? If you see at physiological levels, means at normal levels, it promotes protein synthesis. But whenever because of any reason the amounts are higher, it will promote protein breakdowns, except in the liver. In the liver, it utilizes amino acids to synthesize or convert it into glucose, which is gluconeogenesis. Alright? So it decreases transport in extrahepatic cells, increases transport of protein or amino acids in the liver cells. So it decreases basically the cellular protein, whereas it increases the liver and the plasma protein. Okay, so this is the role on protein. So what does it do with the amino acid in the liver? It increases the rate of deamination of amino acids by the liver, increases protein synthesis in the liver, formation of plasma proteins, and conversion into glucose. What is the role on fat metabolism? So fat mobilization from the adipose tissue increases fatty acid concentration in the plasma and utilization of this fat for energy, and promotes breakdown of the fat so that this fat can be utilized for energy. So it can sometimes, whenever the cortisol in excess, it can also lead to abnormal distribution of fat in the body. You will see later when we talk about the diseases associated with cortisol, how the fat distribution gives rise to typical body features. It also facilitates the action of adrenaline and growth hormone. That is why this action of cortisol is known as permissive action. So permissive action is action of a hormone which helps the other hormones to act along with it. Let's talk about specific function of cortisol. Now, one role, as I mentioned, is in stress. So both physical and mental stress stimulate release of adrenocorticoid hormone ACTH from the anterior pituitary and thereby releasing the glucocorticoids so that it helps for the body in coping up with the stress. Then cortisol has a very important anti-inflammatory effect. So that is why cortisol plays a very important role whenever you're dealing with any kind of inflammation, any kind of infection, any kind of the other kind of states like injury, etc. Whenever we want to block the early stages of inflammation, so it plays the role in two ways. One, it will block if you give in early stages, it will block the early stages of inflammation before any noticeable inflammation even begins. And secondly, if the inflammation is already begun, it will cause rapid treatment or resolution of the inflammation and increases the healing process, very early healing process. Okay? And how does it do that? There are various mechanisms by which it does that. One, it will stabilize the lysosomal membrane. It will not allow the lysosomal membrane to release any kind of substrate. Secondly, it will decrease the permeability of the capillaries. So more capillary, less number of capillaries, less amount of blood circulation there, less amount of metabolites reaching there, less inflammatory mediators reaching the site of inflammation. Decreases migration of WBCs and phagocytosis, suppresses the immune system, principally the T lymphocytes, and thereby also, because since it's lowering all the metabolites or the metabolites which are leading to inflammation, it will lower the fever also. Okay, pyrogens are also decreased, so the fever will also be less. So if you are following the treatment protocol for the COVID-19 infection, the COVID disease, you will be able to see that steroids or cortisol is the principal stay of treatment in the cortisol, because in the COVID treatment, because COVID is the disease which is causing inflammation in all organs, heart, principally the lungs, blood vessels, all right, so leading to different sorts of complications. So cortisol is the mainstay of treatment in these. So you can imagine by doing all these, acting at different levels, it decreases the inflammation. So if you want to talk in detail about the inflammation aspect, it will release from the damaged tissues. Generally, any kind of injury or any kind of inflammation or any kind of infection will lead to release from the damaged tissue of proteolytic enzymes, histamine, bradykinin. So the cortisol role is it stabilizes the lysosomal membrane we just discussed. Whenever there is any inflammation, there is increased blood flow to the inflamed area by means of vasodilatation. So cortisol reduces this degree of vasodilatation. Whenever there is inflammation, there is leakage of plasma into the damaged area. It can lead to clotting. So cortisol decreases the permeability of capillaries and prevents loss of plasma, thereby reducing chances of clotting. It also reduces the infiltration by the leukocytes, WBC. So cortisol decreases the migration of the WBCs in that inflammatory site and also suppresses the immune system. Right? Let's talk about immunosuppressive effect. So this just we talked about anti-inflammatory effect. Let's talk about very important function of cortisol, which has a very important clinical application, immunosuppression. So at pharmacological doses, when we give cortisol as a treatment, synthetic cortisol, it suppresses the immune system in various types of autoimmune diseases and hypersensitivity reactions. So it plays a very, very important role of allergic reactions, like anaphylactic shock, which is most important life-threatening event. It doesn't give you time. For example, as we talked about penicillin allergy in the last lecture also. Penicillin is a drug which is such a dangerous drug. If anyone is allergic, and it's a very common drug allergy which we see in individuals, if you give penicillin in the form of like an injection, whether it's intramuscular, subcutaneous, or intravenous, it will result in death in 2 minutes. You won't have time to give CPR also. And when you're giving it orally in the form of ampicillin, amoxicillin, any other kind of derivative which we are nowadays using as a important antibiotic, it's a broad spectrum antibiotic, so it's used for many important infections. So there also in individuals who are allergic, it causes allergic reaction. So all these people, so cortisol is the life-saving drug. It can prevent, it can revert anaphylactic shock, and it can revert allergic reaction. And the other important are the autoimmune diseases. And the third aspect of immunosuppression is when you are giving organ transplantation. So, for example, like kidney or liver, any kind of transplantation is done. Then the people, because these are external organs or foreign bodies for the patient. So, if the body's immune system is going to reject, first response is going to reject it. So to suppress the immune system of the patient so that it accepts the graft or accepts the organ donated and the body can function normally, cortisol plays a very important role by its function of immunosuppression. So how does it do that? It blocks the inflammatory response to allergic reactions. Whatever inflammatory parameters that are released, it blocks or the release of them. Effect on blood cells and immunity in infectious diseases, it decreases the number of eosinophils and lymphocytes and atrophies all the lymphoid tissue. Let's talk about the role of cortisol in the other system and other effects besides all these important effects we just talked about. So cortisol is needed to maintain normal vascular integrity and responsiveness. It is responsible for preservation of plasma volume, thereby maintaining the GFR and free water clearance. It is responsible for maintaining or increasing the contractility of the heart, thereby maintaining the blood pressure and the cardiac output. It is most important for promotion of bone resorption, and lesser important effects are alters the mood and behavior, and it is responsible for immune development. So if you remember, you must have got the question in the exam also. What is the hyaline membrane disease or the infant respiratory distress syndrome? What one case scenario we had got in your theory paper. So in these patients, I won't call them patients, but preterm infants or preterm neonates who are born before the completion of 9 months of intrauterine life. So if you remember, surfactant is an important chemical which is released by the alveolar type 2 alveolar cells, which lines the alveoli and prevents the collapse of the alveoli. It develops after the in the third trimester of pregnancy, that is the beginning of the 7th month. So if a preterm delivery happens, the baby is born before 7th month or in the 7th month, this surfactant is not released, and there is chance of collapse of the alveoli leading to infant respiratory distress, or what we call as the hyaline membrane disease. So what is the mainstay of treatment? Here, mainstay of treatment is to give steroids or cortisol to these babies, because steroid will help in release of surfactant by the type 2 alveolar cells. It will help in the maturation of the alveoli and the lung. If the cortisol is getting released in the maternal adrenal gland in a normal range, it is going to help in the development of the lung also. The role of a cortisol in respiratory development. In addition to the cortisol, we also give surfactants. How do we give surfactants? We intubate the baby, we put the endotracheal tube, and through the endotracheal tube, we give the surfactant, and this surfactant chemically then goes and lines up the alveoli, and this helps in better breathing and better respiratory effort of the baby. What is the role in muscle contraction? The muscle contraction in cortisol increases the force of skeletal muscle, right? So mechanism of action is similar to what we saw as aldosterone. It has genomic actions and non-genomic actions. Genomic actions are via the intracellular receptors, intracytoplasmic receptors, increasing or decreasing the gene transcription, and the other is via the non-genomic actions by secondary. So this is how the glucocorticoids are regulated. So first of all, important stressor which excites the release of ACTH and CRH. CRH from the hypothalamus, ACTH from the anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary acts on the adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex will release cortisol, and it will does its function, and it will also have a negative feedback effect by long loop on the hypothalamus and also on the anterior. Whenever cortisol is released, it is always released in a pulsatile manner. It is never uniform throughout the day, throughout the week. So the period less than 24 hours, if you see in episodic pulses, it's called as ultradian rhythm. And whenever it's released, period close to 24 hours, secretion is maximum at 8 to 10 hours, or secretion is minimum at 23 hours. This is called as following the circadian rhythm. So it is released every 24 hours in pulses. And when it's released in less than, to say, half hourly or 1 hourly, it is called as ultradian rhythm. So ultradian rhythm is always superimposed on the circadian. This is how what I meant by the ultradian and the circadian rhythm. So if you see during 24-hour cycle, on the x-axis is the time, y-axis is the cortisol secretions in micrograms per 100 ml. So if you see 12 in the midnight, then 4 a.m., 8 a.m., the maximum secretion is in the early of cortisol, and then it starts decreasing. So it happens in phasic manner. These are the ultradian rhythms. Very small pulses which are the ultradian. So these are this is another graph showing the various pulsatile release of the glucocorticoid in a normal girl. So what happens when the cortisol is in excess? This leads to a syndrome called as Cushing's. So whenever glucocorticoid is in excess, it leads to a very odd distribution of fat in the body. This leads to a moon-like face, round face, fat deposition in the abdomen, in the shoulders, back of the shoulders, whereas the limbs remain. So this typical feature is called as the Cushingoid appearance. And because it affects the muscles also, the proteins also in the muscles, so muscles are wasted. They look hypertrophy, and bones also show osteoporosis because of protein metabolism. In addition to this, there is thinning of the skin leading to prominent stretch marks and reproducibility. It can lead to blood sugar raise, or the diabetes, adrenal diabetes can also happen because of decreased insulin sensitivity, and resistance to infections lead to impaired immunosuppression. These patients are more prone to infection primarily because of immunosuppression and secondly because of heightened blood sugar. Hypertension is seen because of sodium water retention. Because the cortisol, if you remember from the initial table, I mentioned that cortisol has a very significant mineralocorticoid activity also. So it's not only it has a principal glucocorticoid activity, it also has a mineralocorticoid activity. So whenever there is an axis of cortisol, it is going to affect both of them. In women, if you see there is an axis of cortisol, it is going to lead a hirsutism also. There is a development of masculine hair. So these are the symptoms which you, signs and symptoms which you see in Cushing syndrome. There is a buffalo torso, moon-like face, hirsutism, gluconeogenesis, muscle weakness, drying on the skin, decreased immunity, osteoporosis. And what are the causes of this Cushing syndrome? There is adenoma, which is sitting in the anterior pituitary, or there is abnormal function of the hypothalamus due to some reason. There is an ectopic secretion. Ectopic means some amount of glandular tissue may be present or of anterior pituitary in some other location, which is releasing it. Adenoma of the adrenal cortex. And when you give long time treatment of glucocorticoid, for example, you're treating any autoimmune disorder, or you're like, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, or any kind of organ transplant has happened. So you're giving treatment for a long time with steroids. So this steroid, these patients can develop Cushing syndrome because of long time presence of glucocorticoid. So how do you treat? You give drugs which blocks the steroidogenesis. That is the synthesis of these hormones from the cholesterol in the adrenal gland. So metyrofone, ketoconazole. Ketoconazole is a very important antifungal agent, inhibiting ACTH secretion by giving serotonin antagonist or GABA transaminase inhibitors. And if there is a tumor, you give bilateral partial, you do adrenalectomy wherever the tumor is sitting, that portion is excised, and you give supplement with adrenal steroids because it is important for normal functioning also. So if you are removing some part of adrenal gland, you need to supplement with secondary steroids. What happens when there is deficiency of glucocorticoid? It will lead to loss of appetite, loss of weight, anemia, and weakness. It impairs the body's capacity to deal with stress, blood pressure is low, there is sodium and water depleted, because of it there is less blood volume, there is lymphopenia, eosinopenia, and if the deficiencies due to defect in the adrenal cortex, the negative feedback effect will lead to elevated ACTH levels, and then you will see complications because of ACTH levels, which are because of leading to pigmentation of the skin and the mucous membrane. So deficiency of glucocorticoid is called as Addison's disease. It is a combination of mineralocorticoid, glucocorticoid deficiency, and Mendelian pigmentation. The reason could be a primary atrophy of the cortex, autoimmunity, even tuberculosis and cancer lead to this. So there is pigmentation in addition to the other features. There is pigmentation on the skin and the mucous membrane. Generally, patients present with the crisis, what we call as the Addisonian crisis, which is an emergency situation. You have to give glucocorticoids by injection. So this Addisonian crisis, how does it present? There is low sodium, high potassium, BP is low, diarrhea, weight loss, weakness, confusion, headache, hypovolemic shock, and finally renal shutdown can happen, which could be irreversible. So now what is the role of CRF and ACTH in terms of mineralocorticoid and glucocorticoid? If you remember, in the hypothalamus releases CRF and the anterior pituitary releases ACTH to control the release of the aldosterone and corticosterol from the adrenal cortex. It also helps in enlarging or increasing the number of cells, causing hypertrophy of the adrenal gland. So this are two roles. Increases the synthesis from cholesterol, and secondly increases the number of cells. In addition to this, if you remember, all the hormones are present as pre-pro hormones. So this ACTH is also present as a pre-pro hormone because it's a protein hormone. So it is present as a propiomelanocortin. So when propiomelanocortin is broken down or cleaved into other enzymes, it releases beta lipotropin, beta endorphin, ACTH, and finally alpha MSH. So propiomelaanocortin is the principal protein from which all the other hormones are synthesized. Beta lipoprotein, beta endorphin, ACTH, and alpha MSH. So beta lipoprotein plays a role in the adipose tissue. Beta endorphin is important in CNS. ACTH is acting on the adrenals, and alpha MSH is acting on the melanocytes. Okay, so the uh, whenever the propiomelaanocortin is in excess and ACTH is not being synthesized because of some blockage or there is deficiency of cholesterol, alpha MSH increases and more melanocytes are synthesized, more melanin pigmentation. That is the cause of pigmentation which we see in Addison's disease. Let's talk about androgens quickly. So androgens, these are your androgens. You remember from the first slide I showed you, cholesterol also synthesizes DHEA. DHE can be converted into estrone and finally to estradiol by the action of aromatase enzyme and dihydrotestosterone. Right. So, what is the role of androgens in the body? So, primarily, DHEA is the principal androgen. So, this has effect on the secondary sexual characters. It has anabolic effects, development of secondary sexual characters, distribution of hair on the body, type of voice a person develops at the time of puberty, the kind of voice a boy or a girl develops at the time of 13 to 14 years of age, and the sexual behavior or the libido. So these are the important secondary sexual characters which are developed by the androgens. So adrenals are the principal source of androgens in females, although in females they only supplement. So what does androgens do for females? They produce estrogen. We saw in the previous slide. So estrogen is important in females, very less role in males. It becomes important in males only when some pathological reason is there. So DHEA production decreases with age, and it's important for us because it is responsible for all the secondary sexual characters. So that's why the health aspects, or they are used as health supplements with declining age. So androstenedione are precursors of testosterone. So testosterone, you know, that important for growth and development and maintenance in male reproductive organs. It's important for protein metabolism, carbohydrate and fat metabolism, and the mineral metabolism. So testosterone and estrogen, I think, will be dealt with in detail in the reproductive system. So what happens whenever there is a deficiency of enzymes involved in the glucocorticoid synthesis? So intermediate compounds increases, and that these intermediate compounds are then converted into androgens. So there will be excess of androgens, okay, leading to adrenocortical hyperplasia and thereby causing what we call as precocious puberty. So puberty happens early in males and appearance of male secondary sexual characters in females. So this is what the okay. So if this is a 4-year-old child who has developed the precocious symptoms like the enlargement of penis and masculinizing effect. In females, the voice will be deeper, there will be baldness, growth of clitoris, deposition of protein, skin, muscle, masculine characteristic, man-like features. And in males, it will be a pre-pubertal male development of male prominent sexual features. So how do you diagnose? You diagnose by the measurement of excretion of 17-ketosteroid in the urine. Okay, so that was about the adrenogenital syndrome, which is because of excess of androgens, because of some tumor or because of some deficiency of some enzyme. So we'll stop here. We have finished adrenocortical gland. We have finished mineralocorticoid, principal mineralocorticoid, aldosterone, corticosterone, cortisol, and we have finished the androgens. In the next lecture, we are going to talk about adrenal medulla. Alright, so we'll end the lecture here. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, ma'am.
पैसा बचाने के लिए ये लोग सबको ये वीडियो स्टूडियो बोल दे रहे हैं। क्या बोलते हैं उसको? सिट्रिक्स नहीं रहता है, वर्चुअलाइजेशन क्या बोलते हैं? वीपीएन। हाँ, वीपीएन वर्चुअल प्राइवेट नेटवर्क, वीएन। मतलब वो नहीं करते हाइपर वर्चुअलाइजेशन। हाँ, मतलब एक वो दूसरा ये नहीं देते हैं जैसे कि एक सेटअप, अरे हम उसमें नहीं करते वीएम बनाते हैं। हाँ, तो वो दे दिया सबको और फिर ले लिया सबसे। हमें तो वैसे भी कुछ काम नहीं करना उसको, फिर उस पर एक्सेसिबिलिटी टेस्टिंग करते हैं। अभी कहाँ करते हैं? वीएम पे हो जाता है। वीएम पे करती होगी ना, गंदा चलता है वीएम बहुत स्लो चलता है। बाकी दिन में इसके पास
फैन पंखा चालू कर दिया। Ano man ikaw,